Markus Wagner, thank you for joining me. We've seen Donald Trump use tariffs as a political tactic in his first administration. How is this any different, and do we know whether this would have his desired effect?
It's somewhat similar compared to 8 years ago, but it's much more prepared. It's much more ruthless, if you will, targeting his main trading partners who are within the United States, Mexico and Canada agreement, the USMCA, and targeting them very quickly out of the gates after the inauguration.
He's said that these tariffs are about drugs trafficking and border security, but who do you think it's really aimed at?
So the ostensible reasons are the ones that you've mentioned, and there might be concerns around this within the Trump administration, but they're really, to my mind, sort of a weaponization of trade measures for completely unrelated purposes. And so it's very hard to predict, number one, how Trump will want to roll these back, because how do you measure success, and who else he might target in the future. So from my perspective, it's much more about signaling to the outside world that he really would like for production of goods to come back to the United States, which runs into its own problems because the labor costs in the US are relatively high. All of that goes to show, I think, that US consumers will see increases in goods that they want to purchase.
If the measures, even by Trump's own admission, will damage America in the short term, what is the benefit to the US of these tariffs?
That's really hard to say, frankly. I usually describe tariffs like this as akin to a circular firing squad, because essentially you are targeting someone else, but essentially hitting yourself in the process. And that's exactly what we're seeing. It's a retaliatory process. I think Trump's idea is that tariffs somehow go back into the kitty, if you will, by way of taxes, which is what tariffs are. They're essentially taxes. And they're somehow, in his mind, being paid by the country of origin, which is, of course, not how it works. And by way of doing this, I think his goal is to decrease taxes in the mid-run. None of that is my prediction, and by and large all economists who work in this space would agree. None of that will work. It drives up prices for US consumers in the short run and has ramifications for countries around the world and consumers around the world and producers around the world.
Speaking of ramifications, could Australia be in the firing line?
Penny Wong gave an interview this morning in which she said she was confident that that wouldn't be the case. And in many ways, I think she's correct, because the United States has a trade surplus with Australia. But at the same time, I think another word that I would use is vigilance, and to be very vigilant in light of the fact that you have someone in the presidency who creates and likes to create a lot of uncertainty, and you don't know whether you as a country are next in unrelated policy areas. So tariffs are being used by the Trump administration in areas that are completely unrelated and could come across tomorrow. He could come across something tomorrow that he doesn't like and would try to impose tariffs on that country at short notice.
And what's the impact on global politics, the economy, and with tit-for-tat measures, what are the dangers of such protectionist policies?
So we've seen this before, and this is the 1930s, and we all know what happened after that. So the beggar than neighbor policy looks very similar to what we're seeing at the moment. And there's nothing like a geopolitical adversary, if you will, that wants to fill a vacuum. And in my mind, that would be China as the beneficiary for many of these, for this particular policy, that could just come in and fill the vacuum that Trump is leaving by trying to essentially remove the United States from international trade governance overall. And I think that would be detrimental for many countries around the world.
Okay, Markus Wagner from the University of Wollongong Transnational Law and Policy Centre, thank you for joining us.